We astronomers always like to search for the life in the universe other than the Earth, right? So there are requirements for life, like such as light and the chemical basis of life, like carbon-based and the silicon-based life. So today's lecture, let's go over this topic and see what other requirements are. So first thing, let's go over the light. So I believe we know a little bit about light, about creating images and using it in a telescope to see the images of the universe, right? So light is a requirement for most life on Earth and is also the messenger that brings all of our information about the rest of the universe. So as I mentioned, we already know a little bit about it. So when we think about electromagnetic spectrum, the visible light is a small range in the electromagnetic spectrum, right? So the radio waves, TV waves, microwave, IR waves, those are low frequency waves. And then when we go to the other side of the visible spectrum, the ultraviolet, X-rays, gamma rays, that's come with high frequency. Now we are interested in this visible light range. So low frequencies light, that's the red light is a low frequency light, and then all the way in the other side, the violet or the blue color comes with the high frequency. So we feel like red light does have a high energy, but it really not. The blue color comes with the high energy. So the range of frequencies that correspond to visible light is rather narrow, as I mentioned, compared to the other range of the electromagnetic spectrum. However, we can find a range of frequencies in the visible spectrum as well. So starting from 430 terahertz to 750 terahertz. So within the visible range, different frequencies of light corresponding to different colors, as I mentioned earlier. So an electromagnetic wave that is oscillating at 750 terahertz, that is 7.5 times 10 to the power 14 cycles per second, would be seen as violet light. So this T, uppercase T and HZ stand for terahertz. Hertz means how many oscillations happen in 1 second. So a wave oscillating at 566 terahertz would be seen as a green light. Then likewise, the red light does have a frequency of 430 terahertz. Right. So maybe you have heard about dual nature of light. So light is a very interesting thing in the universe that's behave as a wave one time and a particle at the second time. So particle means, let's say, imagine a ball-like behavior, and wave means a water wave-like behavior. So we call this as the dual nature of light. Dual means two type of two natures, right? So it does behave like a wave and a particle. So the so in some experiments we can confirm that the or we can observe that the light is behaving as a wave. In some experiments we can see that the light behaves as a particle. So for example, in the photoelectric effect, so when we shine some light onto a metal like potassium, then the some lights can kick off electrons from the metal, so from potassium, let's say. So when we have a 550 nanometer wave reflected onto the shine onto a potassium, then it can kick off electrons from that potassium. So in 1905, Albert Einstein observed photoelectric effect and showed that the beam of light could eject electrons from a metal. And then in 1801, Thomas Young shined light between two adjacent slides like this one. So there's a little opening in between the two slits, and then the light can make patterns. So we call this as interference and diffraction patterns. So there's wave fronts are behaving in a different fashion, right? So That's called the interferences. So in the Young's double slit experiment, he observed that the light is behaving like a wave. So when the light passes through a single slit, and then when it is entering into a double slit, it's create fringes. Like on a, if you look at a screen somewhere here, you will be seeing bright fringes, then the dark, then again bright and dark fringes sequentially. So this is called a interference pattern, and that happens due to the lights behaving like a wave. Here on the photoelectric effect, light behaves as a particle. So the light has two different descriptions. So if it is a wave and it is also made out of a particle called photons, so it's really not a particle, it is a energy packet. So the light does have like photons, which is a energy packets. So the two descriptions are connected by the formula, which is E photon, that's the energy of the photon, is equal to H times F. So H is the, we call that as the Planck's constant. So it is 6.626 times 10 to the power minus 34. My apology, it is not minus 10 minus 34, it is 10 to the power minus 34 joule seconds. And the F stand for frequency. So if you want to calculate the energy of a photon, we need to know the Planck constant, which is a constant, right? So we already know that constant. Then if we know the frequency of that wave, then we can calculate the energy in a photon. Then high frequency light corresponding to high energy photons. Remember, like I mentioned that the blue color light does have a high energy. So here, it is H times F. H is a constant, and you are multiplying that constant by a, let's say, a high value, like a high frequency blue light, right? So blue light frequency is high. So when you are multiplying a higher number here, then the energy will be larger than we having a lower frequency like red light, right? So anyway, so high frequency light like blue color does have high energy photons, but low frequency light like red color does have a low energy photons. Then I think we already learned about emission and absorption of light, but let's go over that one because it is also very important in, especially when recognizing the materials in the universe. So light can only be emitted or absorbed as photons. So photons are the energy packets, right? So we only can have emitted or absorption spectrums as photons. So in addition, atoms and molecules have only certain allowed energy levels. So if you think about an atom, so we have the protons. It's not photon, it's protons. Positive particles will be in the nucleus of the atom. And then we have these shells that the electrons will orbit around, right? So in the first shell, we will be seeing 2 electrons is possible to move around, and then 8 electrons are possible to move around in the second shell. So likewise, third one can occupy 18 electrons, then the other one 32 electrons, right? So these are the, we call these as the energy levels. So that's the first energy level, second energy level, likewise. And this is the nucleus where we can see the positive particles and the other non-charged particle like neutrons. So photons are different, that is energy packet, right? So these two factors that make it possible for astronomers to know what elements and compounds are present in distant states and galaxies. I mean, the emitted or absorption spectrum. So when an atom or molecule absorbs a photon, its energy must supply exactly the energy needed to go from a level that it is onto another allowed energy level. So, you know, like this is the, let's say there's an electron in the first shell over here in the first energy level. So if we provided the energy to this electron that is sufficient enough to jump into the second level, then we will be seeing a emission spectrum. So for each element or compound, there's a distinctive set of allowed energy levels and thus a distinctive set of photon energies that can be absorbed. So here, here's an example of a absorption spectrum for hydrogen. So it doesn't matter where you are conducting this analysis or using a spectrum. If it is hydrogen, you will be seeing this spectrum at particular frequencies. We will be seeing black stripes. Those are the absorption positions, right? So these values of wavelength will stay the same. So if you saw a spectrum like this one, where we have black lines at 656 nanometers, 486 and 434 and 410 wavelengths, then we know this is a spectrum of hydrogen. So if the element is unknown and you're seeing this spectrum, then we can recognize that element, right? So likewise, the hydrogen emission spectrum looks like this one. So at any known wavelength, we will be seeing color lines, and it is very specific for that element. So in this diagram, it's describe you like how these electrons get excited and jump into the upper level while emitting some colors. So here, this is the ground state, and then this is the first level of energy, first electron shell, and this is the second one, third one, fourth one. So likewise, when we are going away from the nucleus, the energy levels, energy getting smaller and smaller, and at the end, we have zero energy level at the top. Then here's another example of an absorption spectrum curve and the emission spectrum curve. So as you see here, we can look at this in different aspects, like this is the atomic structure, right? So here we have spectrum that's where the electrons jump from the second energy level to upper levels. So when the electrons are jumping from the second level to the third level, we see a red color spectrum, right? So likewise, sorry, we don't see red color, but we see a black color stripe in the red color region, because we need to supply that energy for electrons to jump up, right? So it is absorbing that energy. Then in the emission spectrum, now the electrons that excited into the upper levels are not stable there. So those electrons will be emitting that energy and come back, like jump back to their initial level. So here, that electron which jump into the third energy level will jump back to the second energy level to make itself comfortable, right? So in that case, it is emitting that particular energy, and we will be seeing it as a red color stripe here. So likewise, the other electrons also doing the same. So the electron that jump into the fourth energy level will jump back to the second energy level, because that is where it was, right? So it will be emitting this light blue color light. So we will be seeing a light blue color line on the spectrum. And these are called the emission spectrums, where we see the colorful lines, right? So that's happened due to the electron jump from upper energy levels to the lower energy levels. Here, again, in the absorption spectrum, the electrons, those were in the lower energy levels, will absorb some energy and jump into the upper energy levels, leaving a black stripe on the spectrum. So because the photon energy just correspond to the frequency of light, each element or compound absorbs a distinctive set of frequencies from any light that passes through it. So each chemical substances leaves a distinctive imprint on the light that passes through it. So astronomers have only to spread the different frequency of light out to see which ones are missing. So if we know, if we have some data for the known elements, then when you're seeing a spectrum like this, you can easily recognize that. So the missing colors in such spectrum correspond to the light that has been absorbed in passing through outer atmosphere of the star, right? So the pattern of missing colors make it possible to tell what elements are present and the relative amount of these elements. All right, so let's look at the chemical basis of life. So light in one range, it is there. So we can use that light as an energy into a creation of life. Now, we also need another aspect of life, which is chemical basis of life. So we'll talk about carbon-based life and the silicon-based life. So the chemical basis of life abundance. So any form of life must be made from the 90 stable chemical elements that are available in nature. So there are 90 stable chemical elements. So as we just described, these chemical elements leave their signature in the light that comes to us from stars. So by analyzing those relative abundance of elements in the stars that we can observe, we can arrive at the relative abundance of elements in the universe. Well, so if you look at this chart here, so you may see a bunch of elements that we already know. So as you see here, hydrogen. Here's the hydrogen, and then carbon and oxygen. So those are like, if you think about your body, like human body, so 93% of the human body is made out of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So these are the three of the four most common elements in the universe. So you can see it from this chart here. Hydrogen, we have 73.9% in the universe, and on human body we have 10% hydrogen. Helium, 24% from the universe, and in the human body there's no helium. But if you look at oxygen, the universe, it's 0.01%. However, in the human body, we can find 60% of oxygen. Then carbon, other round, it's 0.0046% in the universe, but in the human body, we have 18% of carbon, right? So likewise, the chemical compounds are ranging where it's located. And also, it's very important to understand that our life, the human body, is made out mainly from hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon. So, so these are the three of the four most common elements in the universe, as I mentioned, and the one that is left out, helium, is a noble gas that does not participate in chemical reactions. So helium is a neutral gas. It is a noble gas that does not participate in chemical reactions. So it is not that much interesting in creating the life. Then also notice that we do require significant amount of few relative uncommon elements like calcium here. So in the human body, we can find iron, nitrogen, magnesium, sulfur, and other less common elements like calcium, phosphorus, right? So a whole bunch, but it's a really small amount of. Then why we are interested in carbon-based chemistry? So the carbon-based life is already made of the most common elements in the universe. So as you notice, the hydrogen, carbon, those elements are really common in the universe, and also it is common in our body. So life based on a different set of elements would be using much materials and would be much less likely, right? So after several hundred years of chemistry, we have yet to find any element that forms a variety of compounds that is anywhere close to the one that formed by carbon. Carbon is making a variety of chemical bonds, and it's create various compounds. So here in this diagram, you may see the carbon atom. This is the chemical symbol. So C, and 6 represent the atomic number and the mass, atomic mass. And in the structure of carbon atom, we have in the nucleus, we can find four protons and 4 electrons in the outer shell. So we have 6, I think I made a mistake. So we have 6 protons in the nucleus and 2 electrons in the first shell and 4 electrons in the outer shell. So we have 4 electrons in the outer shell, and if we can add 4 more electrons, we can make it a stable atom. And also if we take these 4 electrons away from the outer shell, again it will be a stable atom, right? So that is the key thing. So here we have a possibility of 4 times higher possibility to create chemical compounds. So here carbon dioxide is denoted as CO2, and here's a molecular structure of carbon dioxide. So we have carbon atom and 2 oxygens bond to the carbon atom. So this is a glycoaldehyde. propanol and propionyl, and this is the glucose structure. So any place you can find carbon and hydrogen bonds, right? So you may see like how it is bonded in these pictures, like how the carbon create the backbone of these molecules. So glucose is the main compound in our body. So it is C2H4O2, right? So that is the chemical notations or the chemical symbol. So C2H4O2 is the glucose. So we have 2 carbon atoms, 4 hydrogen atoms, and 2 oxygen atoms to create the glucose chain. So also notice that double bond between the carbon atoms in the propanol molecule. So here we have 2, double bond, right? So it's make it stable. Then the other hand, the silicon-based life also possible in the universe, because silicon is somewhat similar to carbon, where we have 4 electrons in the outer shell, leaving it to make possible to make compounds. So one proposal for an alternative chemistry for life is that carbon might be replaced by silicon. So silicon is less common than carbon, but not by a large factor, and it is extremely common in the crust of terrestrial planets. So on Earth, it is 25% is silicon in the Earth crust. So it is commonly available. Then the silicon, like carbon, can form 4 chemical bonds, and it does form large molecule called polysilenes that are analogous to the hydrocarbons that make up carbon-based life forms. Hydrocarbons means hydrogen-carbon bond, hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, right? So hydrocarbons are very similar to polysilenes. So again, the silicon is much like carbon. It is possible to create chemical bonds. So the difficulty is that the silicon-silicon bond that is needed to make up the backbone of the molecules is much weaker than the carbon-carbon bond. And the polysilenes are mostly unstable. So in fact, they tend to explode in the presence of oxygen. So if you ever meet a silicon-based alien here on Earth, what do? So will you let the open the spacesuit that the alien can come out? We should not, right? Because silicon can react with oxygen, so it's explode. So we should not open the space suit. So that's why spacesuits are very important for astronomers. So the space suits make the astronomers safe. So if we open a alien who's made out of silicon-based chemicals, then oxygen is not a good thing for that silicon-based life. So the related problem is that the silicon atoms do not usually form double and triple bonds with themselves, like in the propanol-like molecules that I showed you earlier. So carbon-carbon can easily make the double bond, but silicon is not that likely. So it reduces the possibility of variety of molecules. Where carbon dioxide dissolves readily in water and lets itself to carbon cycle. So carbon cycle is doing a great job on Earth, and we will be learning about in the next video. So the carbon cycle that transports carbon through the life forms on Earth, silicon dioxide is a solid that does not dissolve in water. So that creates some issues. So the role of water as a solvent to promote chemical reaction is fundamental to Earth-based life. And it is very difficult to think of a substitute solvent that would work for a silicon-based biochemistry. So finally, carbohydrates such as the glucoaldehyde, which I showed you earlier, have been found in interstellar clouds and in meteorites, while complex silicon compounds have not. So still, carbon-based life is the most common requirement so far, but silicon-based life is still possible, but it is not common as carbon-based life. So life is metal rich, astronomers refer to all of the element heavier than carbon as metals. So it is not the definition of an engineer. Okay, so astronomers refer all of the elements that heavier than carbon as metals, and speak of a star as a metal rich. Its spectrum indicates large amount of less common heavy elements such as iron and calcium. So although carbon-based life is mostly made from carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen, it also depends on the special properties of less common elements such as iron and calcium. So those elements would be missing from the planets of a metal poor star. So we would expect life to be less likely to exist there. All right, so thank you, and I'll please answer the questions, and I'll see you in the next video.